Imagine in 2003 if you owned a small bed and breakfast in Barcelona, something like the Pensión Alberdi, for example. You probably had no internet access because the internet was brand new, and you got all your traffic locally through whatever means you did. Well, into this problem stepped a guy named John Urseg. He was an American who had gone to Spain to study at IESE, the great business school in Barcelona. And while there, he was a sort of self-described middle-of-the-packer. And that meant that when the interview season came along, his buddies were getting interviews with McKinsey and Goldman Sachs and so on, but he wasn't getting those interviews. He did get an interview with a chicken farming startup in Morocco, but he didn't even get that job. So when he left business school, he got a job with an American company called Hewlett-Packard, a great company, and he learned to manage product at HP. Well, this was in the late 90s, and as you can imagine, in the late 90s, technology was hot, so HP was a great place to be, and John learned a great deal. But by 2000, the entrepreneurial urge was in the air at tech companies like HP and really all over the world. So John decided he'd leave HP and start out on his own. So because he knew digital printing from his work at HP, that's what he decided to do. So he got rights to some software, European rights, and decided to build a company around that. Well, it took about 2 years and it failed, and he lost 50,000 euros in that effort. So then he did another new venture. That one failed more quickly, and it only cost him 7,000 euros, and so the needle was moving in the right direction. At that point, he said to his then fiancée, now wife, Lucia, you know, enough with these new paradigms. I've got to do something simple. Let's buy an apartment, a flat, and we'll rent it out to tourists. So they did that. Fortunately, Lucia, a dentist, had good credit, so they were able to get a great mortgage and buy this flat. Well, very quickly, the flat was full. They were getting lots of bookings, and so what do you think they did? Well, they bought another flat. And pretty soon, that one began to fill up, but now they had more availability. And so he said, maybe I need to build a website. There's this new thing called the internet. Maybe I can get some traffic from afar. So John built a rudimentary website and began to get traffic. But one day he realized, if I'm getting traffic for my 2 apartments, maybe I can use my website to get traffic and book other people's apartments too, like the Pensión Alberdi. So John started knocking on doors in Barcelona, doors of 1- and 2-star hotels and bed and breakfast, saying, can I bring you more traffic? And here's the deal. I'll advertise your property on budgetplaces.com, my new website. When I get a request, I'll fax you the request, because of course none of these properties had laptops or computers in those days. I'll fax you the request. You can fax me back some pictures and information and availability, and I'll help the consumer choose which is the booking they'd like. Then I'll charge the consumer 15% of the total stay. I'll send you the booking, and you do the rest, and the consumer will pay you when they arrive. So the business got started and began to grow. And very quickly, John realized this was working quite nicely. He was getting web traffic, and he said, well, gee, maybe I need to open some other markets beside Barcelona. So he dispatched Lucia's brother to Madrid, and they opened Madrid, and then they opened France, and then they opened Dublin, and pretty soon the business was growing very fast. Well, think about the business model here. John's business was funded by the 15% deposits that he would get from his traveling customers. But of course, once he'd done that, there was nothing more he had to do with a hotel. The rest of the transaction was taken care of with a hotel. No invoicing, no paperwork. And John had, for a typical stay, 45 euros with which he could do something. So what do you think he did with that money? Well, he'd buy more Google ads, and that would begin to help the business grow. And he'd learned along the way that Google, which billed him at the middle of the next month for the previous month's bookings, said, well, you know, if you have a credit card, we can extend that even another 30 days. So he had about 60 days of float on the 45 euros he was getting for the typical booking. So by the time he hit 2007, the business switched. It reached scale, and it transformed itself into a business that had been cash flow break-even along the way to one that was highly profitable. At that point, he said, boy, I'm really onto something here. He did a land grab and ramped up his efforts to get properties all over Europe. So he opened in a number of European capitals, grew the business very fast, and said at one point in 2010, you know, this business has done really well. I've created a lot of value here. And I remember a lesson that I learned in my business school education. John D. Rockefeller said, I made all my money selling too early. So John Ursig asked himself, I wonder if it's time to sell my business. He then got an unsolicited offer, which he turned down, and decided that the right way to sell his business was really put a structured process in place. He got a financial advisor to help him sell it to the highest bidder, and underwent a somewhat difficult and tortuous process over about a year and a half, ended up selling the business for more than 25 million euros. Now think of the return on investment that John Ursig got in this customer-funded business. He put no money in the business up front other than the 2 flats that he and Lucia bought and still owned. All the money to start the business and grow the business was funded by those travelers' deposits of 15% of the booking, and that was sufficient to grow the business from 2003 to when it was sold in 2011, 8 years, 0 to 25 million euros on no investment. Would you like that ROI on the business you're about to start?